all my questions and comments.
And if you wanted to schedule a meeting, you just would call Karen and she could get it lined up for you.
All right.
Hi, my name is Cynthia Rux, and I am at S65W22855. I'm in the subdivision Rolling Meadows of Vernon. I'm just off of Garrett Drive there. And my question is, we're currently, my understanding from this, R1 zone in the township of Vernon, but you're looking at changing half of our property, and our house sits right on, from what I can tell from this perspective. The front half of our home, our driveway, would be still town of Vernon. The back half of our property, and we're on about 1.6 acres, would be rezoned to the township of Waukesha, or the county zoning, I'm sorry.
Yep.
How does that affect me practically when we're talking about property taxes? We have a 4-year-old home.
We get them.
Recently built.
We get all the taxes.
Okay.
Sorry.
So there's no change in any tax situation or anything. It really is just affecting future building.
The zone.
If you want to get a building permit to do something for your house, it's going to depend on where that is going to be situated on your property as to whose ordinance applies. That's it.
So if it's falling right in the middle of my home, that's kind of what I'm looking at.
Mm-hmm.
How would you determine that? Are you going to send a surveyor out, or?
Well, I mean, we'd work with the.
We do that. We do that all the time.
We do this all the time.
The building inspector and the zoning administrator, they work together with it.
We generally kind of see where the line lies in the house, and if what you're proposing is on the town side, will be based on what the town's ordinance is, and if what you're proposing is on the county side, it'll be based on the county's ordinance. But these districts are so similar that,
for example, you have to be 50 feet from the road on the town code. County code 50 feet from the road. Town code 20 feet from neighbor's lot line.
Okay.
County code 20 feet from neighbor's lot line. You can have 2 accessory buildings, town code, 2 accessory building, county code. Size limitations are a little different there for accessory buildings. In terms of home square footage, town code says you have a 15% floor area ratio limit. So all living space, I believe, is how you get
upper and
lower space up to 15% of lot size. County code, you get a 17.5% building footprint. I think that basically means you could probably build twice as big a house in county jurisdiction in R1. Again, if you meet the locational requirements. So it in that regard, got much less restrictive for you, that a new owner could look at your property and say, I can build a house twice as big as I could have prior to, if it was strictly county zoning. If you straddle, you got to comply with both, and the more restrictive would apply there. But I guess it's just for folks that it may make life a little easier in some regards, or provide value to the property. I don't know. I just don't think it's all bad because of a jurisdictional change. That there really is so much similarity here. These are not night and day differences in code difference.
Okay, my next question is, because you're changing this boundary from this navigable water, does that change the viewpoint of a homeowner's insurance, that they're saying, all right, now you're starting to fall into a floodplain?
This has nothing to do with regulatory floodplain issues or the National Flood Insurance Program. We are not. It has nothing to do with regulatory floodplain. This simply has to do with a navigable waterway. There's probably floodplain associated with those ponds, but none of that has changed. That's federally managed. Those maps and those.
If you need flood insurance now, if you did before, you need it now, and if you don't before, you don't now.
Yeah, we are not changing. This has nothing to do with flood lines, floodplains, or flood insurance.
So so that's the same. So it really just falls down on if we decide to do any addition or do any extra outbuilding, you have both sides coming in and fall into the same area where the other gentleman said we'd have to pull permits on both sides to have people come out, and there may be more costs involved to us for that process.
But if you build a shed in your backyard, for instance, the only permit that's going to apply is the county. So you're just going to get your permit through the county, and then the town building inspector would issue the building permit. In every case, the town building inspector issues the building permit. It's just whether or not it falls on which side of the line for the zoning permit.
And prior to 2016, everybody did that in Vernon.
Right.
You were subject to either the shoreline ordinance or subject to the county zoning code outside of shoreline areas, and that's what everyone did. They worked with the county and the town until the town adopted their own ordinance outside of shoreline areas. And since there isn't, most of Vernon is outside of shoreline, most of the activity now occurs within the town code.
Okay, so we would be contacting the town of Vernon first, really, for any
You could.
first steps?
You could.
You could.
Is that what you're saying?
Or you can call the planner of the day at the county and we can point you in the right direction.
Okay.
We have somebody manning a desk, 5 days a week, and there are no costs for any type of zoning information that you need from county staff. So we're there to provide information as well.
Okay.
Peter Olson.
Pardon?
Peter Olson, W232 South 6790 Millbrook Circle. Everybody kind of touched a lot on what I was wondering before I sat down here. So my property runs right next to Millbrook. The pond just in my, not on my property, but just in my backyard. The brook runs right along the side. My property was originally zoned. The back, let's just break it thirds. The back acre was environmental corridor, the center was R1, and then the front was like wetlands. I think it was 300 feet. So I had all kinds of stipulations when it came to what I could and couldn't do. I mean, it was almost so confusing to me, it was kind of ridiculous. My question is, with the way this is redrawn now, my property is pretty much all in the environmental corridor except like 5% that's in R1. So how much of my property or how much am I restricted? Or am I only restricted within that environmental corridor now, that floodplain, or not floodplain, the county shoreline?
I think there may be some confusion because the white area here
Yeah.
isn't all environmental corridor. That's the previous, that's the area that's the 300 foot off the stream that was already zone county.
Okay.
So you're not seeing the zoning districts there because it's not of concern tonight. The only thing that's changing tonight is the things that are in color. So we're not actually showing the zoning districts. It says environmental corridor on there,
Yeah.
but that's only a small portion that it's actually applied to. There's a lot of areas that are white that are actually these other colors, but they're zoned that already per the county ordinance.
So this back little corner right here was environmental corridor. Now just that little tiny finger is going to be added to R1.
It's probably gonna. Are you talking about this little thing right here in the yellow, or this thing? Right?
This little.
That's a little hard to read the map, but if it was it's proposed to be environmental corridor environmental corridor overlay district in the shoreline ordinance, and it was
Same thing.
Same. So no change other than it went from environmental corridor and town code would be environmental corridor and county code. And if you're on the river, you may not be affected. If your lot is in the white area, you're currently subject to shoreline zoning and nothing is changing for you. If you're within 300 feet of, it sounds like you're within 300 feet of the brook being right on it.
Well, 80% of my property is now.
Yeah. I mean, if you have a real deep lot, perhaps part of it that extended beyond 300 feet would now be subject to the jurisdictional change, but I don't think so.
So you were mostly zoned county before, now you'll be entirely zoned county.
Or he
Yeah,
was entirely.
about 90%. I remember talking with Vince about this a year ago before I hurt myself, so I couldn't do anything this last year. And my property was so jacked up. Now I'm wondering if this is going to make it easier for me, or is this going to make it even more difficult for me to build something the way it sits now?
Why don't I give you my contact information after the meeting? Because I think some of these questions may be easier on a lot by lot. I think we're just looking at a scale that's very difficult for us to. And I don't want to put off your questions. I'm happy to address concerns. I just think that we can provide better information if we pull it up on our GIS and kind of. I'd be happy to spend some time with you this week or when you have time to go through that stuff. And anybody else for that.
Correct me if I'm wrong, all you're doing is changing the jurisdiction.
That's it.
You're not changing any of the zoning districts.
Well,
So you're not,
no, because
are you
each code has,
adding-
but the districts do read differently.
I mean, as far as his zoning and environmental corridor
Right.
on his property now.
The corridor didn't
it's not
change.
gonna change.
The boundaries,
correct.
the boundaries identical.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The boundaries of the corridor are not changing. It's just that the enforcement of it may change, based on how Vernon enforces environmental corridor versus how County Shoreline enforces it. But I'm happy to go into all those, because I know corridor and conservancy get complicated, and I certainly understand the confusion. So happy to help.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah.
Anybody else with any comments?
I don't have any negative comments. I just
What would
question
you-
about the map.
Yeah, sure, come on up. Absolutely.
I was trying to figure out some map. So,
Would you state your name?
I'm Jerry Campbell. W232 South 6875 on Millbrook Circle. So I think my wife, our parcel is this parcel right here.
Okay.
And my understanding from the map is that this is the 300-foot line there. That's now gone to the 1,000-foot line coming around this way.
Correct.
Is that all that it is?
Yep.
So that just means pretty much, that looks like pretty much our property. It's just going to be jurisdiction within the county.
Looks like you'd be getting
Okay.
zoning. Yeah, you get your
Okay.
zoning approvals from the county and then building permits from town. So
Cool.
you're looking to-
Very good, thank you.
You bet. Easy enough.
Are there any more comments? Any more comments? Anybody like to restate anything? Okay. We'll close the public hearing at 6:45. All right. We'll go to item 6. Miscellaneous matters. Following matters will be discussed and possible action taken by the Vernon Town Board of Supervisors and the Town of Vernon Plan Commission unless otherwise noted. All right, item A, Plan Commission's recommendation to the Vernon Town Board for regarding the proposed zoning classification as presented by the Waukesha County Department of Parks and Lands to closely match the existing town zoning designation for the properties affected. These subject lands are as follows. Okay. So, it's part of the southwest 1/4 of the northeast 1/4 and part of the west 1/2 section 1 and part of the east 1/2 section 2. T5N, it'd be Town 5 North, Range 19 East, Town of Vernon, Waukesha County. More specifically, the subject area is located north of County Trunk Highway ES and west of County Trunk Highway U and east of Big Bend Drive. All right, Plan Commission. Any comments? Questions?
I just think the DNR's distinction of navigable waterways is a bunch of crap most of the time. They discover new streams, oh, this is navigable because it floods one day out of the year. I think that really needs to be reviewed at some time, but that's unfortunately not our jurisdiction.
This was supposed to help, and they changed the law. It still screws the people.
I had the same basic question as him. I just wonder what type of wood they determine. Is it what type of fruit they put in, pine or oak? I'm being funny, I understand.
I know what you're talking about. Exactly.
We have nobody here telling us what that is. Maybe we should have a person from them explaining this not only to us, but these people that are here.
And I also never understood the difference. Why is it 300 feet from a stream and 1,000 feet from a pond? You know what's the difference? Do you think they protect streams more than a pond? The ponds eventually silt in.
I know that the 1,000-foot jurisdiction was originally based on establishing, I believe, 3 rings of lots around lakes. So the original goal was to have lake lots, and then you had the ring road, and then you had a second ring of, and the idea was that was the pattern of development around lakes, was about 3 rings of homes, and so I think that's honestly how the 1,000-foot jurisdiction got established, quite honestly.
And there's no distinction between that kind of a lake and what we're talking about here for the small pond,
That's
because
right, yeah.
it's certainly not the same thing.
And you go to like Mill Brooks, and where does the mill, or a typical mill pond, I should say, not Mill Brook, but a mill pond it's a wide, I mean, is it a pond, is it I understand there is some.
I know, I just have a lot of issues with DNR and the way they do things.
Well,
I think I said mine.
Bill? I
My
mean to
thought-
skip you ahead, but this is Plan Commission first. Bill?
At one time, there was a 300 and or a 500 foot measurement from shoreline also, correct? For declaring shoreline from navigable streams. That was my understanding. You broke down rivers as opposed to lakes and ponds.
Yeah, you
Is
could be
that
right. That I'm not aware of. I'm only aware of 300,000 and the extent of the regulatory floodplain being what make those determinations of jurisdiction.
I know that our part is over, but can I ask a question?
Sure, you want to relax the rules and take a question from the floor?
Sure.
Sure.
I'm just curious now, we're talking about this 1,000 feet versus the old 300 feet thing. Is that basically so that people, you're taking more control of the area so that people can't build there? Is that the idea behind that 1,000 feet
I'm
thing?
not sure that's the case. I mean, I don't think shoreline zoning exists to prevent development. I think it's there to make sure that there's appropriate protection of public waterways in the wake of development. I'm not sure I have a good historical basis for 300 or 1,000. I mean, these things were established in the 70s, and I know I heard stories about the 3 rings around typical lakes, and certainly lake development is denser than typical riverine type development, where you don't see a lot of dense development in blocks and blocks and blocks against rivers. But I'm not really sure exactly where they come up with those numbers.
It's my understanding, and may correct me somebody if I'm wrong, but you have to have road frontage in order to build on any piece of property anyway, don't you? So that 1,000 feet thing, as far as being able to build in a particular area, is a moot point in this case, because nobody could build there anyway. I'm with him. I think the DNR is overstepping their boundaries.
Bill? You have any comments, Bill?
No, that's pretty much all I have.
Megan?
Not really.
No, really? No.
I think just the recommendation that you get the final confirmation is applicable, appropriate.
So what happens if we, recommendation from the Plan Commission, and I'm just asking the question, I'm not saying it shouldn't be, but we don't like this. When we vote recommendation to not go along with it.
It's a recommendation in front of the Plan Commission. I'm not sure what would happen. I mean, I can't predict what the Plan Commission would do. I still, again, I'm not sure that they
would consider that, but they may just scratch their heads and say,
yeah, I mean, if it's a town recommendation versus if they feel like they're compelled to act by state requirement, I'm not sure that they could act any
In other
differently.
words, what you're saying is we'd probably get overridden anyways eventually.
Well, if
It
it's
would
based
just
on
take longer.
if it's based on state law, it's based on state law.
If there's a good reason that we feel or we think these are not navigable for some reason, and we could prove that, then there might be a reason to second guess the DNR and hold off on this for now until more investigation was done, but I don't think anybody's got anything at this point that we would feel that
Well, how do we
we
prove
would,
that?
we
We
would,
gotta have another study, and we gotta spend.
Well, I mean, they've not
more money
produced
on
a
it,
formal, they've not produced a formal letter. We anticipate that it will eventually be forthcoming, since they have corresponded that it has been navigable, and we trust their word. But yeah, short of concerns about the technical aspects of the determination, I'm just not. I mean, it's
All
pretty.
it takes is a 100-year rainstorm where you can float a canoe down at 1 hour when the water's
Right, right,
That's
one day.
navigable.
Well, and I don't even think we're talking about navigability of Mill Brook. That's been established decades ago. We're talking about these are ponds, and I don't think anyone doubts they're ponds. And if the brook's navigable, you're going to argue that the pond connected to the brook is not. It's probably a difficult argument to make. Now, if the argument is that it's not a pond, it's a brook, I'm not sure where that goes. I started looking at that. I'm not even sure where the difference is clearly defined. There may be something there.
I asked the question.
Yeah.
it's a good question.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I just think that that's probably where the only ability to alter from, I think, what may be just the reality here, that if it is what it is what it is, and that state law says we're compelled to change jurisdiction.
Change jurisdiction. Okay.
Fair question, though.
So, we don't really have a choice back to that. So is there a motion? Is there a motion? Nobody wants to make the motion. Huh?
You got a problem.
No, I'll make the motion. I'll make the motion to accept with the formal letter from the DNR of what actually is the navigable.
Is he saying a contingency or?
Contingent, yeah, so
Yeah.
contingent on the formal determination of navigability.
Right.
And that's your recommendation to the town board?
We have somebody here explaining it to us and the people,
From,
We can't make that
I know you
determination.
determination. I think these people have property, and I don't want to preach here, but these people have property and it's being changed without them knowing it until they get the notice. They had, when they bought, they knew they had 300 feet. Now they've got 1,000 feet. They've lost 700 feet of property. If I was in that position, I'd be ticked off also. Okay? That's my personal opinion as far as property owners. So let's get all the information we can before we make this determination. And the only way we can do that now is by having that motion, or the motion passed, that we should have the designee here from the DNR also.
I don't think we're going to get anywhere under the navigability, but I would be curious to hear the definition of what makes that just a pond versus a wider portion of the stream, or how they define that.
And I think that would come under navigability of the pond, your explanation.
Well, if you're navigable, the stream's navigable.
I know.
I mean, the pond's not navigable. Why is
Well,
that
if-
considered a pond versus just not part of the stream for the 300 feet versus 1,000?
But then, if it's considered a stream, does that change where the,
Well, it's currently
1,000
considered
feet start?
it's currently considered a stream, and there is a 300-foot jurisdiction based on it being considered a stream. Tonight is the discussion of these are ponds. The jurisdiction expands based on that fact. So we're not here to discuss the navigability of Mill Brook. That's been vetted, and I don't think
Yeah.
that's being questioned here.
So we're questioning more just going from a pond versus a stream. So it also goes to 1,000 feet
who
being
made
a
the
pond.
determination?
well, the DNR. made the
Okay, we're back to the same people.
Yeah,
We're back to the same. It's,
same organization.
I don't want to be a jerk, but gee, these people
I
are
know.
upset.
But do you still want that in the motion? I'll put it in there. Is it a representative from the
Representative
DNR?
DNR to explain themselves on this.
Can I just ask a clarifying question?
Or-
Yeah, this is a quick question. The only real change it's gonna have with regards to this, if I wanna build something on the property, then it just depends on which type of county or town. There's nothing changing with taxes, obviously. I'm not, my parcel numbers aren't being split, it's just with regards to future development, correct? And
Yeah, I'm not sure I would use the
apply
word, I've heard the word lose used, and I'm not sure that would be a word I would use. It's,
No,
yeah.
I'm just saying, like, you're not obviously losing property, your parcel's not being split into two different jurisdictions tax-wise.
Right.
It's just with regards to getting permits for
For zoning,
development.
yeah. Permits and use requests.
Yeah.
You wanna read the motion, Madam Clerk? I know. That's
I have a
why I
motion.
want it read again.
Well, and I just want to clarify, it's a motion by Chairman Thomas Bird to recommend to the Vernon Town Board of Supervisors to approve the zoning classification as presented by the Waukesha County Parks and Land Use Department with the contingency that the DNR produce a map defining not the area, defining.
So it was a formal report. The formal report
Not a
of
map, a formal,
navigability.
okay, a formal report, not a map? Don't they
It
want?
would include a map.
Yeah.
I think that's appropriate, a formal
Report,
navigability determination
okay.
report or
Okay.
something along those lines. And that report will contain the factors that they believe were evident to make the determination. So it doesn't just say navigable check, it will say there's been an established bank and all the different, and I'm a planner, not a DNR guy, but they will lay out the specific reasons why they feel it met the criteria of a navigable waterway. So you will be provided that additional detail in that report.
And just to clarify, isn't that the reason that MW Marine pulled? Because the DNR gave them specific information on what they...
I wasn't involved in that project, so I don't know those
That's why they
specifics.
backed out.
Yeah, we have those maps. I should show you those maps. Oh, and there was no second to the motion.
But then Merle wanted,
Somebody to come in from the DNR?
That won't happen.
To explain what they're doing, so that people can hear it.
I'd be happy with just a report because,
And a map. Report in the map.
right,
yeah, you can't load the DNR anyway.
I could get someone in from the DNR to explain that at a different meeting, but I mean, you see the whole area of the town there, that's all in white, that's all county, that's all navigable, the same, so you really should, that'd be a good meeting sometime, not tonight, but.
And the DNR, if folks are interested, DNR does offer workshops for doing ordinary high determinations. If everyone wants to put on their muckers and go out there, they are happy to show folks how they do those determinations. If there's any interest, let me know.
all right.
There is a science behind it, whether you agree or not.
There is a motion on the floor. Correct,
Yes,
Madam Clerk?
yes, but no
There's no second.
I'll second the motion.
Second. Any more discussion? Could you read the motion one more time,
I knew
Madam Clerk? I want to make sure that it is what it is.
The motion reads as Chairman Thomas Bird moved to recommend that the Town of Vernon Plan Commission recommend to the Vernon Town Board to approve the zoning classification as presented by the Waukesha County Waukesha County Department of Parks and Land Use, with a contingency that the DNR produce a map and a report of determination of the required lands. Motion was seconded by Commissioner Megan Johnson. Is that good enough?
Okay. The moved and seconded. Any more discussion?
Would that be a verbal report, a written report, what are we looking at?
Written.
I'd like to
It's
see-
always a written.
I'd like to see the DNR say here.
A written report and map, because you can't verbalize a map. Do you want me to put the words written report? All the reports I've seen from the DNR are all written.
Well, I'd like to see something equivalent to what we did with the dump site up on ES, where we had the DNR physically come in and explain to us what's going on, what's the definition, what's the criteria, the whole thing.
I can
First,
get,
make it easy to cop out.
I can get somebody in. I know the
I don't know if
guy.
that's a plan commission thing, Bill, or a town board thing. I think we accept it with the motion from the town board that we put that in there then. Because that's who the recommendation is gonna go to the town board from the plan commission.
Okay, that's fine.
The town board coming, asking the DNR to come and explain the report, I think will carry more teeth than if the plan commission doesn't.
I was gonna see the report too before they would come in. So.
So do we have a roll call vote?
Chairman Thomas Byrd,
Yes.
Supervisor Commissioner Jeff Millies,
Yes.
Commissioner Merle Wagner,
Yes.
Commissioner Supervisor Bill Craig,
Yes.
Commissioner Megan Johnson. Mr. Chairman, I note for the record that you have a unanimous vote of consent and motion passes.
Item B, Vernon Town Board action on proposed zoning classification as presented by the Waukesha County Department of Parks and Plans, closely match the existing town zoning designation of the properties affected by the subject lands and described as follows. Part of the southwest one quarter of the east northeast one quarter, and part of the west 1/2 section 1, and part of the east 1/2 section 2, town 5 north, range 19 east, town of Vernon, Waukesha County. More specifically, the subject located north of County Trunk Highway ES, west of County Trunk Highway U, and east of Big Bend Drive. So, town board members, you heard the discussion, any comments?
Not much of a choice.
I have a question. Not familiar with that area all the way through. Does the stream, Millbrook stream, river, whatever you want to call it, go through the ponds? Is it connected to the ponds?
I think so.
Then my question would be why, when they considered those navigable, were the ponds not included at that time?
It was missed.
Yeah, and I don't
So
know.
if they weren't,
It may have just been a miss due to
I'd
their
like to understand
size.
what they use to qualify a navigable water. Is that some guy walking in rubber boots? Is it a boat going down? You know, there's questions that come out of that. What do you consider a navigable water?
That's, Eddie, that's why we should recommend the report with an explanation
We will.
with the DNR here to explain the report.
Yeah, because I'm really confused why ponds all of a sudden
It'd
can
be
we
good
use.
clarification.
Yeah,
Then we get them in here, you know.
seems odd.
Yeah, I wasn't blowing you off, bro, but I think it'd be more coming from the
That's what got your thumbs up.
town board than coming from that. You want to relax, town board want to relax the rules here to let the gentleman speak?
I'd just like to ask if you are considering having somebody from the DNR come in and explain this whole thing in more detail, would that be something that we as residents would be notified about so that we could come and hear it for ourselves?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Any,
Great.
Madam Clerk, anybody that spoke
I like
tonight,
that.
we could
Well, what I do is I would mirror the county's notification, as the county did notification for this hearing. But then it'd be nice too that there's a lot, like I said, if you see all the white parts of that map, there's lots of people that are in that jurisdiction that might want to hear the same discussion, because it is interesting. You might not agree with it, but when those people from the DNR come in and start talking their talk, it is interesting. I mean, it's good information.
First of all, I apologize for coming in late. I was delayed at fireside. But anyway, Millbrook Pond, you're talking about that where the fire pond used to be? Is that the area what we're talking about? That creek that runs right in my subdivision right there? Is that what's under discussion?
It's actually more north of you.
Well, there's a big pond,
Yeah.
and I was wondering what the relationship of the village basically borders that that territory, because that was annexed, the DeLuca property annexed in? Okay, and I was just wondering, how does the village play into this in regard to, do they have to adhere to the individual 1,000-foot shoreline jurisdiction?
They have their own
You're
zoning.
shaking your head no, and he's shaking his head yes.
As a village or city, they implement their own shoreline zoning. So the county doesn't implement
They
shoreline
don't get
zoning.
involved in that at all, huh?
Yeah, but we're talking about the DNR, you said, right?
So, sure. So the DNR still makes navigability determinations in villages
Yeah.
and cities, but the county doesn't apply their zoning there. It's the village's own shoreline zoning that applies in those areas.
Does the village have to adhere to the DNR's?
Yeah, of
what
course.
is classified?
Yep.
I'm just curious because there's been some instances where they have not really gone along with what the DNR has said.
So that 1,000 feet, 300 feet is not standard in all villages and cities.
It is.
That part still is.
That's the
That's from
same.
the state, you said, right?
Those are the state requirements for streams, rivers, ponds, lakes. It's just who implements their shoreline zoning, and a lot of times shoreline zoning, the county's shoreline zoning ordinance is similar to the town's.
But you just made it sound like that since they were separate, they had different rules. That's what I was
Gotcha.
trying to clarify.
Gotcha.
But the 300 and 1,000 cannot be changed because that's a state statute.
Correct.
Maybe have to state law changes.
Okay, so we've got a recommendation from the Plan Commission. Is there a motion from the town board?
I'll make a motion to accept same statement as was made by the planning commission.
You're concurring?
Concur with it. With one addition. The town board wants to get the body from the DNR in here to have a face-to-face discussion about this whole process. I got very specific questions I'd like to ask. And we incorporate those involved as part of the motion.
Okay.
So are we saying town board action is dependent upon the,
I would think so.
you almost have to
How
delay.
can we, I guess by law, we're kind of, really don't have much say in this, but I think we're at least owed an explanation. So hopefully, somebody will come in and tell us if there is something we can do about this, which, from what you're telling me, doesn't sound like there's any options open on that.
I'm just saying that if there's a clear navigability determination, it's state law that we need to act. But if you have concerns about how we got there, I'm just wondering if those are concerns, if there's not value to keep the public hearing open. I'm just concerned that if you recommend an approval based on the DNR just showing up, what happens if they just show up and you don't like what they have to say? Well, you have granted approval based on the fact that your requirement was just the DNR show up and explain themselves. I'm just trying to understand how the mechanics of that would work.
But isn't this pretty much a rubber stamp? I mean, I'm sitting here listening to something.
Well, I'm just trying to. It sounds like you guys have some legitimate concerns, and if that's the case, how do we address those best? And if the navigability determination is not sufficient, I just want to make sure that you guys make a motion that'll work, I guess, and that you haven't approved it just by having the DNR show up.
The navigability was always in play. The 1,000 feet came from because they determined it not to be a stream or a brook, they determined it to be a pond or a lake. The navigability was always there.
Yeah, how wide's the stream got to be to become a pond?
Fair question.
You know, those are the type of, and I'm wondering, very basically,
Sure.
we got a river that's been under the ordinance, and now all of a sudden, the ponds it comes out of are enjoined, but they weren't before. Why?
Right. Yeah, fair question. I just want to make sure that your motion allows you to make sure your concerns are addressed.
Just like, look for clarification, because it doesn't make sense to me.
And I will warn you, it may be a challenge to get DNR staff in here in any kind of expedited fashion. If you have a contact, more power to you. but it may hold up business, just so you're aware.
I'd like to make a friendly amendment if I could. And that would be that the town board would delay any action until we've had a first presentation by a rep from the DNR, and the board is satisfied with that presentation as far as
And make the vote at that time?
correct.
It's your motion.
I accept the friendly amendment. I'd like to forestall the vote until that time.
Is that part of your motion?
It's part of the motion.
You forestall the vote?
I want to hold the vote off until after the meeting for the DNR.
How can you make a motion like that?
Can you make a motion like that?
You don't want people to vote on your motion? You said forestall the motion?
It means approval of
The approval, the vote.
So you'd be tabling the vote for that reason. Table the vote for the DNR to come in and make a presentation.
Exactly.
The motion that I heard you say, Supervisor Ed Moline moved to concur with the Town of Vernon Plan Commission to approve the proposed zoning classification as presented by the Waukesha County Department of Parks and Land Use, with the contingency that the DNR produce a map and a report and an explanation and proof of determination of the study and explanation by a representative of the DNR and those involved. I don't know what "and those involved."
Well, I'm trying to put it together, and I think what I have to do is withdraw my concurrence,
Yeah, but I don't know what he's "and those involved." It's like,
right?
So then after that motion was made, then Supervisor Craig
Made a friendly motion.
made an amendment to the motion, but it sounds like they're two different things, and that's what Karen says. One is to table the vote until you get someone to come in here from the DNR to defend the report or explain the report in the map.
The vote, which is basically, I don't want to double.
So I think, but there's already a motion on the table
with no second.
with no second. So
So
that one's got to die first, and then you can make a new motion.
Let's
Take a vote of that one.
There's not even a second. There's not even.
Yeah, not even a second. Yeah.
Is there a second to the first motion?
tie.
Is there a second? Is there a second? Motion dies. No second. Is there another motion?
You want to word it?
Okay, I'll try. I move that the town board delays any action on this until we've had a presentation by a representative from the DNR. And Karen, you had a pretty detailed list there. Do you want to itemize what you had right before?
Well, it wouldn't make sense if you're.
Presentation of a map. Well,
Part of the language.
all the logical things we're going to want
I don't know how to
to have
do this.
presented.
I think what Supervisor Craig is saying, and if I could
Is delay the action.
to table the action until
Yeah.
another date, until such time that a representative from the DNR can explain the report and the navigability determination.
Correct.
Yeah, we're in no hurry here. I mean, this is since 2016. I'd like to hear the explanation and how they did it. I think everybody in the room would like to hear that. So I don't think we're hurting any type of zoning issues.
Nothing is pressing right
No.
now in terms of development there.
Right. So that's your motion, Bill?
Yeah.
The table
and-
this,
And the report to
till we
be
get the
given
report, the
in person.
report and the DNR to explain the report to us in person, so we can ask them questions. Okay. You got that, Madam Clerk?
No, but I'm working on it now, but it's basically to delay the action and with the contingencies stated by the Plan Commission.
Yeah, put table the action.
Until a date said certain, or just till the DNR comes forth?
Sounds
with
like we
the-
need to see that before
We need to
it
see the
happens.
report and
Okay.
then set up a time with the DNR. But also notification of residents, so they can,
Notification of the residents that were notified in this hearing,
yeah.
or all residents?
All of them.
No, this hearing.
Why would you want to include somebody? Yeah.
It would show up as an agenda item, right?
No, what I would do is I would do a legal notice in the paper, and if we could get it so that we could put it in the newsletter, we'll put it on Channel 25, we'll put it on YouTube, we'll do as
Whoever
much.
wants to come in town can come.
But no mailings.
Well, we would mail to these people,
Yeah.
because this was their that would be easy to do, notification. But then encourage everyone that's in,
Talk to your neighbor.
right.
Looking for a second.
Looking for the motion.
Supervisor Bill Craig moved to delay the action until a representative from the DNR comes forth with a contingency of the report, the map, and an explanation and proof of determination by a representative of the DNR presented to the town board at a public meeting.
I'll second.
Everybody happy with that?
Yeah, I like it.
Okay.
I'd at least like to hear somebody explaining what they're doing.
Yeah. I agree. All right, then moved and seconded. All those in favor of the town board members, let's have a roll call vote, Madam Clerk.
Chairman Thomas Byrd?
Yes.
Supervisor Jeff Millies?
Yes.
Supervisor Ed Moline?
Yes.
Supervisor Bill Craig?
Yes.
Supervisor Gary Weldy?
I was going to abstain on the first motion, but I can support the second motion for the simple fact that we'll get a better explanation from the DNR. So I vote yes.
Mr. Chairman, note for the record that you have a unanimous roll call vote in favor of the motion.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Do you want to come? Should we know?
All right. Item C, the Town of Vernon Plan Commission recommendation to the Town of Vernon Board regarding non-substantial telecommunications mobile tower modification request from Anthony Miss Teresa. The Aztec Network Solutions located at West 24 South 10030 Big Bend Drive, Big Bend, Wisconsin. So, go ahead.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you, folks. Have a good night.
Bye, Ben.
So the applicant is looking to modify some equipment on a cell tower on Big Bend Drive. There's currently equipment there now. There's a tower there. There's equipment there now. What they're trying to do is they're trying to modify a few of the antennas that are on the tower itself. Basically, what they're modifying is position 4. So what this means is at the top of the tower, there's a set of antennas at the very top, and position 4 is one of the antennas on 3 sectors. So position 4 happens 3 different times on top of the antenna. So they're changing some antennas and some of the equipment down on there, and they're also changing some of the equipment down in the bottom where the equipment is managed here. And what you need to review here is whether or not it's a substantial modification or not. State statutes basically say that if a tower modification, cell tower modification, is not substantial, then you need to determine that and you need to approve it. So once that happens, it's kind of a done deal. So I did review this. In the case of the state statutes, it's non-substantial if for structures that are less than 200 feet in height, then they can increase it by 20 feet and it's still not considered substantial. They can increase the width by less than 20 feet in width and it would be not substantial, or they can increase the square footage of the existing equipment in the bottom compound by not more than 2,500 square feet and it would not be substantial. So they are not increasing the height of the tower, they're not increasing the width of the tower, and they're not increasing the area of the equipment on the bottom. So my opinion, that is not a substantial modification, but the Plan Commission and the board would also need to make that determination.
All right, you want to read your recommendation?
Sure. So they're basically the recommendation, if the Plan Commission should choose to approve, be based on 4 standard conditions, which are that the plan of approval shall incorporate herein and made part of by reference the application, plans, reports, and documents presented to or modified based on the direction from the Town of Vernon Plan Commission on July 11, 2018. The use of the subject property shall be in substantial conformance with the same, except as further restricted or modified herein. The petitioner shall allow Town of Vernon representatives to inspect the premises following 24-hour notice for the purpose of determining compliance with the approval. The petitioner shall obtain the appropriate permits from the Town of Vernon, and then the petitioner will reimburse the Town of Vernon for all expenses.
Now we have all of the documentation, all of it.
We do. The application was complete. I made the determination
June 12th?
on June 12th, correct.
Sorry.
And we are within the guidelines of what that application states, the timeline?
Correct. You have 45 days from when it's deemed complete.
I'll make a motion to recommend to the town board approval of the non-substantial telecommunications tower modification request for Anthony Mistera, subject to the 4 following conditions that were stated.
I'll second.
Second. Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. So,
Town board?
Town board. Town board's decision regarding the non-substantial telecommunication mobile tower modification.
I'll make a motion to approve the request I just made, stated for
Is it-
non-substantial telecommunications.
Is it to concur with the plan commission's? Okay.
And is there a second?
Where the board?
Town board. Town board.
Awesome.
Which one you want?
I got, darn it.
I beat him, I got
Any discussion? Any discussion? No? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Item E, Plan Commission and Town Board review and proposed changes to the Town of Vernon zoning code and discussion and possible action regarding next steps to the town zoning code. So,
You can have mine.
in your packet, gentlemen, these were put together by Sean, correct, Sean?
I met with Vince and Karen, and we went through these and made the list together.
And
These are potential zoning amendments. Since you've adopted your ordinance, there's been things that have popped up along the way where you notice either mistakes or just little things that could be tweaked or fixed. And Vince had a list of those, Karen had a list, and then I spent just a little bit of time going through and based on my use of the code so far and what I thought were potential changes. So that's what you have in front of you. It isn't precise language, but it's just a summary of the issue that we're looking at. The next step would be to determine which of these make sense based on your feedback, and then go forward from there in terms of drafting the actual language, passing along to the county to make sure that it makes sense from the county staff perspective and it fits with their ordinances, and then possibly letting Attorney Macy take a look at it before final review and approval. And then obviously the final step would be the county board would approve. Do you want us to go through each of these? I don't know if you had a chance to look at them. We can, I think, pretty quickly go through these potential changes. Most of them are very simple. A couple are a little more complex, but I think most of them are very quick. And actually writing the language for these, for the ordinance amendments, is not a big deal. Would take very little time, I think, to 90% of these.
Is this your suggested language as we're reading that?
This is not suggested language, but just consideration. So, as I mentioned, I didn't craft the actual zoning language, but just the summary of the ideas.
It looked like it was just the explanation of where the problem lies.
Exactly. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. So the first, and it goes in chronological order for the most part with the ordinance. The first thing was the definition of basement, which is in section 300-4B in the definitions. The reason this was going to be removed was the second sentence. We're talking about removing the second sentence to basement because it talks about story, the way it's defined. Nowhere other part in our ordinance we talk about stories as we're measuring height, as we're measuring anything else, because one of the things that we like to do is move from the floor area ratio requirement. We just talked about that before with the last issue that came up, and move to the building footprint requirement. The county used to have a floor area ratio requirement. When the town adopted their zoning ordinance, you mirrored that. They've since changed it. They've went from floor area ratio to building footprint.
Yeah, originally they actually mirror what we originally had proposed. They denied it.
The building footprint?
Yes.
Yeah.
So then once we went back to the area to floor ratio, we just changed it from 10% to 15% consistent in our zoning district.
Yep.
Then after we got our own zoning, they decided, hey, that wasn't a bad idea. Maybe we should go to 17% in the footprint. So that's where they are. So by implementing these changes, we are going to mirror county, which is what these are exactly what we had proposed originally before we.
And it's much easier to administer based on building footprint because you're not messing with how much of the basement's livable, how much of the upper story is livable. You're looking at the building footprint, and it's a simple calculation.
So let's go back to what Ben had said earlier as an example, where we're at 15% area to floor ratio, where you can actually build a bigger house on a property than if it's a ranch, then it's 2-story. This way, it'll give us a little bit. We'll parallel county. So in this particular case, where the gentleman split his property or she split his property, it would be the same.
The jurisdiction wouldn't make any difference.
Right.
Yeah.
Wouldn't make any difference.
So that's why in basement we wanted to remove the word story, because it doesn't matter anymore. If we go to the building footprint versus floor area ratio, which is the next item. So the next item is add a definition for building footprint and how the square footage is measured, consistent with Waukesha County. Strike the word except. That was something that we originally were going to make an exception because the county. Vince was wondering if the county had specific language in there. I checked the county's definition. It's basically just measured from the foundation all the way around, and it doesn't include any of the building overhang as long as it's 24 inches or less, which is also consistent with our overhang provisions as well. Mm-hmm. So do we want to talk about those things before we move on? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. The next is section 300-4B, which is how sign area is calculated. I needed a clarification in terms of how it's written. The last sentence is not clear in terms of whether both sides. So if you have a freestanding sign, for instance, do both sides count toward the square footage or not? Because the way it's written now, it's unclear. So I guess the question is, how is it intended? Are both sides intended to count toward that or not? I wasn't around as part of the discussion.
No, it was.
So what we're saying then, if we have one freestanding sign that's 4 by 8,
mm-hmm.
it's the same size, 4 by 8, 32 square feet. If you're coming from a different side of the road and they have another sign on that side, that would not be applicable. You couldn't do it.
You couldn't do it. So if you have if the limit's 32 square feet and you have a 4 by 8 sign with 2 sides to it, is that permissible or not? Or could you only do 16 square feet per side?
Right, and that's where we have to make a determination.
Right. Was that the intent originally?
Because we'd be in non-conformance here, wouldn't we?
I thought the intent was the signage would be 32 square feet.
Total.
Meaning if you had a monument sign, regardless of whether it was two-faced or one-faced, it was supposed to be 32.
Okay, so
I thought that was our...
Only one side counts then, is what you're saying. One side counts.
Yeah, you don't measure.
You can do both sides. You only measure one side.
Right.
But the question you asked is the sign have to say the same thing on both sides?
No. That's not what I'm asking. That's a good question. All I was wondering is because here, let me read it. It says, where a sign has more than a single face, each sign face shall comply with the total sign area. And that's the wrong word. The word comply isn't the right word. Is it count toward? Is it? So each sign face shall comply. Does it total? Does each sign count toward that?
Technically, a two-sided sign could only be 16 feet on each.
Right. So what's the intent? And we'll write it to be whatever the intent is supposed to be. We'll clean the language up. I just don't know what the intent is.
Now, this only pertains to permanently placed signs?
This, not temporary signs, yeah. That's something different.
And temporary meaning?
Temporary would...
months or whatever.
Well, there's certain provisions that go along with a temporary sign, like an election sign or something like that. And those are mandated by state law in terms of what you can and can't do there.
But you're primarily worried about permanent signs.
Right.
I'm worried about permanent signs, and if both sides count toward the 32 square feet, or they each can have 32 square feet, for instance.
I would say each side.
Each side gets to have, and maybe that's what I'm asking is more, when the discussions happen.
The whole thing is
4 by 8.
That's it, 4 by 8.
And
I
each
thought
sign.
that's what the intent was, but it's kind of it's unclear.
Yeah.
So Sean,
I'd like to
you can
clean it
draft
up.
it.
Yeah, I think we'll just tune the language up to make that clear.
Did commissioners want to go through this whole thing, in-town board members?
It'd take a while.
Well, does anybody see anything here that gives you heartburn? Have you had a chance to look at your package?
And the whole conditional use thing, that not all that language is affected. When she did the highlighting, Sean, in their packet, I wonder if you look at Vince's.
Yeah.
Can I just interject one thing? Maybe if we can jump, I hate to jump around, and I was going to talk to Sean about this also. One of the things that we propose is telecommunications, what we just went through.
Yeah.
Whether all these non-substantial things have to come to the town planning.
Or staff can make determination
Staff
if it's
can make
non-substantial.
determination.
Yeah.
Typically, I don't see in other communities where they're going to the planning commission.
Right. It got written into the ordinance that way when it was drafted, and it's not required by law that the plan commission and board make that non-substantial determination, just that the town has to make it. Someone at the town has to make that determination. Attorney Macy, in passing, I asked him about that particular issue, and he'd said, well, it can still get sticky, and sometimes it's controversial, right? It can be controversial when you're determining that, and whether the burden should be on the staff or not. So that's something we have to
But the
decide.
staff would always have an option if there is any.
To bring it to the plan commission and board if they wanted to do that, and we could write that in
Like, if the building inspector and the zoning administrator, that's the key. That's where you get the hook. If the zoning administrator and the building inspector don't agree, that's when they come to the board. Because if you ever hear them debate an issue, it's compelling to hear what the zoning administrator says and what the building administrator says and how one agrees with the others.
Yeah, and it came up when we were talking about frontage the other day, and you got to debate the issues.
Sean, on page 35, letter G.
They didn't answer.
As in Rick. The second phrase says, including cut sheets. What are cut sheets?
Oh, a cut sheet is just a spec for lighting.
Oh, okay.
So it tells you the wattage and the specifics.
Did you guys want to see these non-substantial changes to? Okay, because anything that's big on these towers, you're going to see any substantial.
If we determine it to be beyond that, we'll bring it to the plan commission board.
Okay.
Well, this to me, to go through all this is pretty moot because verbiage is all going to change in here anyways. This is telling the verbiage is what I'm interested in.
So maybe I could bring a couple of the ones that we want specific feedback on right now, and then all the ones that are very simple we can bring.
Well, I would
specific
like the
language back.
commissioners and the town board to take a look at these and ask any questions or this is your homework.
Well,
Take a look at it.
Just look at it.
Never read them all.
And
I said the next 100 pages are completely highlighted, and I'm kind of saying, okay, what's the question on some of these?
Well,
The question is in the memo. Right?
that conditional use one, Vince, show that conditional use one. That whole thing is not supposed to be highlighted.
Okay.
Yeah, disregard there's a specific area of the conditional use provision that Sean wants to talk to you, Sean and Vince, but that she highlighted the whole conditional use.
Well, he put a note up front that the conditional use
is not part of,
Yeah,
that's something else.
and I put that in my memo also, that that's not on the table at this point.
Yeah, so Jeff, these are the specific questions in
Right.
those highlighted
I agree with the
sections.
whole thing, but
What are we asking?
As we go through this process, we've only been doing it for like a year and a half. We've noticed that, sometimes the first go around you don't get everything perfect, and that's what we're just trying to change, make some modifications as we saw in the last year and a half, things that have come into play.
And there's two since we just met. We wanted to clarify the P1, the public, like Big Bend Elementary, and our sign is in non-conformance, isn't it? As far as
I don't know the size.
Our own P1 signage, and the zoning is not so.
Because it's an electronic sign
Yeah, but I think even the size of ours.
Square footage?
Yeah, our P1.
Sure.
And the other thing is the land altering activity. There's some verbiage that Sean would like to correct because it's actually worded incorrect. Remember when we were reviewing, it referred to...
the section numbering in the land
right.
altering.
It's just the numbering
is simple. It's simple to we don't need your feedback on that necessarily. It just has to be corrected.
Yeah, it needs to be corrected.
So the signage in the P1 is not... electronic message boards are allowed in all business districts.
So what do you want to do, John?
well,
I'd like to get feedback from Vince on where the problems he's run into is, and Sean from where we're gonna run into problems.
Right.
And see what the verbiage you come up with is to solve what Vince runs into and what you notice, so we can read it and see if we agree with the verbiage.
We definitely could do that. I guess if I may just hit a couple things, because I don't even know if we should attack those or not. I don't want to do any of these that we don't want to do. I don't want to waste the time changing things if we don't want to change them. Okay.
Starting now.
All right. One big one is BP zoning. Okay, or B3 zoning. In Enterprise.
What we did down there?
Yeah, Enterprise Drive has that conditional B3 zoning. So that when that was originally instituted, it was based on the county's language, and then it got when the town adopted their own zoning. We also have a B3 zoning that applies in a couple of other places. They don't match, right? They have slightly different uses. The description of the uses is slightly different. So one of the proposals to make them the same is to take those two zoning districts and combine the best of both of them, or what we wanted to see, to be only one B3 zoning district. So we don't have a B3 that applies somewhere in the town and this conditional B3 that applies at the business park, because that's very confusing.
John, didn't we have a lot of debate over car sales and all that stuff, and that's probably not in the county zoning, I would assume.
Well,
but if we take it out, we screw the people in.
But we wouldn't take that one out because B3 already the normal B3 already allows auto sales.
It is.
And now the new conditional B3 also does. But there's a couple other uses in there that aren't really congruent, where the language it's written slightly differently, so it's interpreted slightly differently between them both. One of Attorney Macy's suggestions when we first started looking at amending the conditional B3 was to make them the same, because it's going to be nothing but problems in the future.
So what Sean would like to do is draft something for you to look at that would be like
the new B3 that would take a hybrid of both of those.
Right.
Be
Yes.
consistent with the county?
No, with what we want.
What we want rather than, okay.
Yeah.
How's that gonna affect the business park?
We want to make sure whatever we wrote in there wouldn't make what they're doing illegal.
Yeah, you want to make them compliant.
That's definitely what I
You don't want to do that, yeah.
No, we don't want to change anything in that, but we want
So
to
you're-
make it consistent throughout, so we don't have any...
So you're telling Sean and Vince, yes, draft us something, right?
It might be mostly a matter of just taking the conditional B3 and using that as the template to change our regular B3, but with a couple of slight tweaks.
Right.
Okay.
So they said
highlight
yes.
where we lose something in ours, because it sounds like theirs is more detailed than ours, and maybe
This is all ours.
It's all ours, but it was based on the counties originally.
based on county.
Yeah.
Well, you gonna add things to it or change things to it? based
He'll
on
show you,
county?
what he's going to do, he's going to show you the two olds and the new.
Okay.
And show you what we propose to change to make them one district.
That's what I'm-
Okay.
For
That sounds good.
definition, is horse considered livestock?
What?
A horse?
Yeah.
Horse, a goat, a pig, or 20
That's
chickens.
livestock.
Yep.
Okay.
Unless you did.
There's only two. It's not considered
Horse is
livestock.
considered
It's not
livestock.
dog is
Oh, a
not.
what?
It's a horse, a goat, a pig, or 20
Alright.
chickens. Okay, go ahead.
Let's
What
see.
else?
Let me see what else is pressing.
2 minutes.
Yeah. Do we want to talk about yard sales?
Yeah.
Oh,
Do we want to quickly talk about yard sales?
Yeah, because I think they're going to agree with what you're proposing.
Okay, so what we're proposing, right now you're allowed to do three consecutive days at a time, including the setup and takedown. So it's 3 total. But you're allowed to do as many as you want per year as long as you have 1 day in between that. So the proposed change is to allow 3 consecutive days, not including setup and takedowns. You can set up 1 day, have it 3 days, take down 1 day, but you can only do as many as 3 events per year. So that all makes sense, but the big question
here's
is
the question.
whether or not you require a permit for that.
That's the only way to
how do you
track
keep
it.
track of them if you don't?
An honor system, I guess. If
So
so,
the neighbors look at their complaints.
so you don't.
It wouldn't be
Not
a,
honest to begin with.
it wouldn't be a permit, it'd almost be like a permit we have for fire. You know, now we have, if we were wrong, our fire permit is, you come in, you register, and it's good for a year, am I correct?
And that would be easy for, I mean, you have the clerk's office track it. That's what Sean's question is. Because it's a valid point. How do you know if somebody's having 16 or 12? You're going to have to put that on the clerk's office.
Right.
But that's what Sean's asking. Do you want it by permit? Because otherwise you have no way of regulating it.
I would
I say no.
No permit.
It's unusual to require a permit for rummage sales.
Yeah, if someone's having a lot of rummage sales, I think the neighbors will complain and say something.
We got
It'll
three.
be- It'll be word of mouth.
Yeah.
You're only
Yeah,
supposed
the
to
other
have
system
3.
works, because if the neighbor sees too much difference.
Well, if it
there's
did
no-
happen, they would call us and we would document that it's in place. So I would go out, someone in the town would go out, verify that it was done on this day, and if they did it again and there was a complaint, so.
Yeah, then we'll track.
Probably track it.
Yep,
You
between
wouldn't
Vince and
catch every
Without a
single one,
permit.
but you'd catch the problem ones.
Yeah, if you got happy neighbors.
Heck for putting a burning permit. I am not putting that.
Okay.
It's there if you need to use it.
Right.
Gary,
Yep.
will want license
So,
on that.
okay, Sean's good. He's good. You agree with the 3 days? Only 3 sales a year. 3. Okay, we'll take that. That's good.
I think
That's
we're good. I think we're fine.
Is adequate. That takes care of almost
Anything
all.
else?
We can draft some language.
Okay, we're good. He's done.
Good. All right, so he's gonna, and anything else you think you need to put verbiage on, you can bring that back to
Sounds
Yeah.
good.
Plan Commission. Will you be able to have that done by the next, August?
Plan commission.
Yeah, I can do that. It's not. I don't think it's a big. The changes that we're proposing are not.
Are not
And also,
extensive.
gentlemen, read this, read your, and madam, sorry, memorandum, and if there's any questions, get them to Karen. Karen can disseminate them to us and to Vince and Sean, and we can go from there. That way, you can get your input, because if we go through all of these right here now,
We'll get you a draft right away.
well, not only that, it is we don't know what's gonna happen, it'll get, but we don't see it in front of us yet. I'd rather have it written and say, yay, I don't like this, or no, I don't like
Karen
that.
said if 3 of them grouped together, we'd have to have all 3 here to know what's talking.
Yeah.
And you're going to like it. You'll like the. I guarantee what Sean and Vince are going to come up with. You'll like it.
Okay.
We haven't been
Everybody-
satisfied yet.
Town board and plan commission concur?
Yep.
I like
Bill? What?
Yeah, push it off to the next meeting.
Bill, though? What?
Yep.
You shaking your head no?
No, I have no I thought you wanted, no.
Oh, I thought you were.
No concerns,
Oh.
not yet.
Okay.
We're about to have a problem.
Okay. Plan Commission's approval of minutes from May 9th.
Good, good.
I'll move to approve the minutes from May 9th unless Bill found some corrections.
I don't have to put that in the motion, do I?
I'll second it. Any corrections?
Not this time.
Are you good, Bill?
Sean,
Are you-
there was a question
he said
about mixing those charts for the matrix. I was trying to find it, couldn't find it.
Oh,
Is that simple process and they cleaned it up so we had one chart instead of two different charts?
So, yeah, so what I'd like to do is to have the permitted and conditional use on in the same chart so that you can quickly look and see, if you have a use in mind, you can see quickly where it's permitted, where it's conditional, without having to flip back and forth to see the list.
Yep.
Not to mention that you can make sure that all your definitions are identical between them.
But when you dismiss conditional use at this point, I didn't know if that was still applicable when you combine them. Or you need to look at something to see if there was something that would prevent that.
He's got a lot more work to do on
Conditional use in
the overall,
general.
but he's going to clean up what we need to clean up quickly. The other stuff,
That one may wait till we actually do the conditional uses because it's so entwined in that.
I think I note somewhere, because I think it's a good idea. I looked at both of those and you're right.
Yeah, I'm constantly flipping back and forth.
It's not easy.
Right.
Bill said he was okay, Tom.
Yeah. Been moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it.
I wasn't here, so I don't know.
Are you on abstain?
Pardon?
Are you abstaining?
Yes,
Okay.
I was not the meeting.
Is there a motion to adjourn the plan commission meeting?
So moved.
Been moved and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Plan commission adjourned. Is there a motion to adjourn the town board?
So moved. Second.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
I predicted that
1
one.
minute apart.
Thanks for coming in.